The desert wind of Xylos carried no sound, only an oppressive, ancient stillness that pressed against the eardrums, a silence so profound it felt like a warning. Beneath the twin, blood-red suns, the ochre dunes stretched into infinity, broken only by the jagged, obsidian maw of the Basilisk warrens, a place spoken of in hushed, fearful whispers across the galactic trade routes, a place Rex Valerian, renegade pilot and investigative journalist with a knack for finding trouble, was determined to uncover. He sought a truth, a story, perhaps redemption, but found instead a guardian, a creature of scaled elegance and formidable power, her presence an unspoken vow to protect the sanctity of the silence and the life within. Rex adjusted the chrono dampeners on his environment suit, the recycled air tasting stale against his tongue. The silence was the first thing that struck him, even before he'd landed his battered freighter, the Star Seeker, a safe distance away, camouflaged against a rock outcrop. His preliminary scans had shown life, deep within the warrens, but around the entrance, an unnatural quietude reigned. No scuttling desert creatures, no whine of the wind through the rock formations, just nothing. It was the kind of silence that screamed of a recent, terrible event, or one about to unfold. He'd come chasing rumors of the basilisks, creatures whose gaze was said to turn flesh to stone, or lock the mind in an unbreakable paralysis. A cryptozoologist's dream, a spacer's nightmare. For Rex, it was the story of a lifetime. He moved cautiously towards the cave entrance, his hand near the stun pistol at his hip, though his primary tools were his optical recording implants and the multi-spectrum scanner in his gauntlet. The air grew colder as he approached, the light from the twin suns failing to penetrate the darkness within. He activated his helmet's low-light filters. The tunnel sloped downwards, unnervingly smooth, as if bored by colossal worms or ancient, forgotten technology. The silence persisted, broken only by the faint hum of his suit systems and the crunch of his boots on the gritty floor. Then, a flicker, not of light, but of something else. A distortion in the air, a shimmer like heat haze, but without the heat. It coalesced, taking form. She was magnificent and terrifying. Taller than him by a head, her lithe form was covered in scales that shifted in color from deepest obsidian to a rich, earthy terracotta, catching the faint light from his helmet in mesmerizing patterns. A long, powerful tail twitched almost imperceptibly behind her. Her head was reptilian, with large, intelligent eyes that burned with an emerald fire. She carried no visible weapon, yet her entire posture radiated danger, a coiled spring ready to strike. This was no mere beast, this was Zylitha, though Rex did not yet know her name. A low thrum vibrated through the rock beneath his feet, a sensation rather than a sound, and he felt a peculiar pressure build in his sinuses. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. "I mean no harm," he projected, his voice carefully neutral, amplified by his suit. "I'm a journalist here to observe." Zylitha tilted her head, her unblinking gaze fixed on him. He felt an almost imperceptible shift in the air around her, a change in pressure, a faint, unidentifiable scent that his suit filters struggled to categorize. It was her way of communicating, he would later learn, a complex language of bioelectric fields and pheromonal bouquets, utterly alien to his human senses. Right now, all he registered was a profound sense of territoriality, of implacable will. He saw a faint, almost ethereal glow under her throat, a pulse of soft, bioluminescent light that matched the rhythm of her breathing. Her blood, he'd later discover, possessed unique, almost magical properties. The creatures within these warrens, Rex continued, trying to sound reasonable, charismatic even, a skill honed from years of navigating treacherous interviews and extracting information from unwilling sources. They are legendary. I only wish to document their existence, not to disturb them. He believed in a code, his own quirky set of ethics: observe, record, but do not interfere unless life was unjustly threatened. Zylitha took a step forward, silent as death. The emerald fire in her eyes intensified. He sensed rather than heard a command: leave. It was so powerful, so absolute, that his ingrained instinct was to obey. But his journalistic drive, his need for this story warred with that instinct. He held his ground, trying to project reassurance. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine cut through the silence, a sound Rex knew all too well. Ship engines, descending fast, too fast, not his. His internal threat display lit up Cathar scout vessel, the notorious, predatory species that viewed all other sentient life as chattel or food. His heart hammered against his ribs. What were they doing here? Zylitha's head snapped up, her attention instantly diverted from Rex to the approaching threat. The subtle glow at her throat pulsed faster, brighter, and the air around her crackled with an almost visible energy. He saw a flicker of something he couldn't name in her eyes, not fear, but a cold, ancient fury. In that moment, he understood. She wasn't just guarding the basilisks, she was a life warden, a protector of this sanctuary, and her vigil was absolute. The Cathar were anathema to everything she represented. The Cathar ship, a jagged, insectoid craft, screamed overhead, its weapons already charging. Zylitha hissed, a sound that was both reptilian and something more, something that resonated deep in Rex's bones. She moved with blinding speed, not towards Rex, but deeper into the warrens, gesturing with a sharp, clawed hand, an unmistakable command for him to follow. The immediate, overwhelming threat of the Cathar had forged the most unlikely and unwilling of alliances. His pursuit of a story had just become a desperate fight for survival, alongside a creature beyond his wildest imaginings. The silence of Xylos was about to be shattered. Zylitha moved with a grace that belied her size, her scaled feet making no sound on the tunnel floor. Rex, encumbered by his suit, struggled to keep pace. The Cathar ship's energy weapons strafed the entrance of the warrens, sending tremors through the rock and showering dust from the ceiling. Explosions echoed from outside, the previous silence now a cacophony of destruction. They know about this place. Rex grunted more to himself than to Zylitha. His renegade pilot instincts were screaming. Cathar didn't just show up by accident. They were hunters, methodical and relentless. Zylitha glanced back, her emerald eyes narrowed. She made a series of complex gestures with her hands, then pointed deeper into the tunnels. He got the gist, a back way, or at least a safer way. He was beginning to see the inventiveness in her tactics, a mind clearly accustomed to defending this place. As they plunged further into the labyrinthine tunnels, the air grew thick with an unfamiliar, musky scent. The basilisks, he presumed. His scanner picked up strange energy signatures, consistent with the legends of their paralytic gaze. But Zylitha moved through these passages with confidence, her presence seemingly a balm to whatever lurked in the darkness. He saw glimpses of creatures inside caverns, huge, serpentine bodies, eyes that glinted with an unnatural luminescence, but they remained quiescent, almost respectful of Zylitha's passage. She was indeed their warden. A section of the tunnel ahead was blocked by a recent rockfall, likely caused by the Cathar bombardment. Rex swore under his breath, dead end. Zylitha approached the blockage, running her clawed hands over the stones. The glow at her throat intensified, and a faint, shimmering aura enveloped her hands. Rex watched, fascinated, as the very air around the rocks seemed to grow still, the dust motes freezing in place. Then, with a low hum that he felt in his teeth, she pushed. The rocks didn't crumble, they seemed to unknit, small sections vibrating, and then falling away silently, as if the sound of their collapse was being absorbed. Silence Weaver. The stories, the whispers he'd dismissed as spacer exaggerations, were true. She could literally manipulate sound, or its absence. In minutes, she had cleared a narrow passage. As Rex squeezed through, a sharp edge of rock tore a gash in his suit's arm. Alarms blared inside his helmet. Damn it! Pressure leak. Zylitha was instantly at his side. Before he could activate the emergency patch, she pressed her hand over the tear. He felt a strange warmth, then a slight, tingling coolness. When she pulled her hand away, the tear was sealed, not with any sealant he recognized, but with a thin, rapidly hardening translucent film that glowed faintly green for a moment before fading. He looked at her hand. A droplet of her blood, the color of liquid emerald, shimmered on one of her claws before she quickly licked it away. Her blood had healed. The legends, the unique biology, it was all overwhelmingly real. Thank you, he managed, stunned. She merely nodded, her gaze already scanning the tunnels ahead. The Cathar were not just a random encounter, they were hunting her, or what she protected. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything Rex had anticipated. His journalistic instincts were now secondary to a more primal urge to survive and understand the incredible being beside him. They emerged into a vast cavern, lit by phosphorescent fungi clinging to the ceiling. In the center stood a raised stone platform, intricately carved with symbols Rex didn't recognize. It felt ancient, sacred. But their reprieve was short-lived. A section of the cavern wall imploded, and Cathar shock troops poured in, hulking insectoids with chitinous armor and multi-lensed eyes, wielding crackling energy lances. They're cutting off the exits. Rex yelled, drawing his stun pistol. It felt woefully inadequate. Zylitha let out a piercing cry, a challenge that echoed through the cavern. She moved like a blur, her claws flashing, her tail a whip. Where her skin was breached by energy blasts, her blood, a vibrant, glowing green, sizzled and smoked on contact with the Cathar armor, corroding it rapidly. Corrosive healing, glowing her biology, was a weapon and a miracle. Rex, using his agility and years of dodging pirates and authorities, laid down covering fire, his stun bolts momentarily disabling a few Cathar, buying Zylitha precious seconds. He was inventive, adapting his tactics, using the cavern's natural formations for cover, trying to predict their attack patterns. Despite their fierce resistance, they were outnumbered. A Cathar commander, larger and more heavily armored, entered the fray, its gaze fixing on Zylitha with chilling focus. It barked a series of harsh, clicking commands. Suddenly, a blinding white light filled the cavern, accompanied by a disorienting sonic pulse. Rex and Zylitha, along with the Cathar, were thrown to the ground. Figures in sleek, silver environmental suits repelled from unseen openings in the ceiling. They moved with military precision, deploying containment fields that trapped the disoriented Cathar. One of the silver-suited figures approached Rex and Zylitha. Its faceplate was polarized, but the insignia on its chest was clear: the Galactic Concord, peacekeepers. Or, more often, enforcers of the dominant political powers. Rex Valerian, a synthesized voice said, and the designated Xylosian biotic entity. You are both to accompany us. By order of the Concord Emergency Council. Rex pushed himself up, his head ringing. Accompany you where? And what in the void is a Xylosian biotic entity? Designation, Zylitha. The Concord officer stated, seemingly ignoring his question, its attention fixed on the reptilia. Zylitha had risen, her stance wary, her emerald blood still sizzling faintly on a minor wound on her arm. The officer continued, interspecies conflict levels involving the Cathar hegemony have reached critical threshold. A peace initiative has been invoked. You, Rex Valerian, as the first human to make confirmed contact with this entity, and you, Zylitha, as a representative of a previously uncatalogued sentient species possessing unique defensive capabilities, are hereby conscripted as provisional delegates. Rex stared. Delegates. You want us to negotiate with the Cathar? They were just trying to eat us. His journalistic mind reeled at the absurdity, even as his renegade spirit bristled at being conscripted. Zylitha let out a low growl, and Rex felt that strange pressure again, the air around her shimmering with unspoken protest. He could almost taste her indignation, her refusal. She was a guardian, not a diplomat. Your participation is not optional, the Concord officer stated flatly. The Cathar have unexpectedly agreed to send observers. This is an unprecedented opportunity. Failure to cooperate will be met with severe sanctions. The officer's gaze swept over the Basilisk warrens. And this sanctuary will be quarantined. Indefinitely. The threat was clear. Zylitha's posture stiffened. The well-being of the basilisks of her charges was paramount. Rex saw the conflict in her, the fierce protectiveness warring with the implications of this forced diplomacy. He, too, felt trapped. He had a code, and leaving this incredible being in her sanctuary to the whims of the Concord or the Cathar felt like a violation of it. Perhaps, just perhaps, this insane peace initiative was the only way to protect them both, and to understand what the Cathar truly wanted with Xylos, and with Zylitha. Looks like we don't have much choice, Rex said, looking at Zylitha. He saw a flicker of something in her emerald eyes: frustration. Yes, but also a dawning, reluctant understanding. Their unexpected union, forged in the heat of battle, was about to be tested in the sterile, treacherous halls of galactic diplomacy. They were being forced together, bound by circumstances neither had chosen, on a path that promised only more conflict and uncertainty. The fight for survival had just taken a very strange and very unwelcome turn. The journey to the designated neutral station, a colossal, ring-shaped edifice named Aegis Sphere, orbiting a benign gas giant, was tense and largely silent. Rex and Zylitha were quartered in adjoining, Spartan rooms aboard a Concord cruiser. Guards were posted, a constant reminder of their provisional delegate status, which felt more like prisoner. Rex spent much of the time trying to learn more about the Cathar and this sudden peace initiative, but the Concord databanks were heavily redacted. What little he could glean painted a grim picture. The Cathar were expanding, their incursions becoming more brazen, their appetite for conquest and consumption seemingly insatiable. This peace initiative felt less like a genuine attempt at diplomacy and more like a desperate gamble by a terrified Concord. Zylitha, for her part, remained mostly withdrawn. She would sit for hours, perfectly still, her eyes half closed, the faint glow at her throat a steady, rhythmic pulse. Rex respected her silence, her need for solitude, but he also felt a growing urge to understand her. He'd seen her power, her dedication, the miracle of her healing blood. He was a journalist at heart. Mysteries intrigued him. And Zylitha was the greatest mystery he'd ever encountered. He tried talking to her, offering her nutrient pastillas, which she ignored, and filtered water, which she accepted with a slight dip of her head. His attempts at conversation were met with those subtle shifts in the air around her, the faint, unreadable sense. Frustration gnawed at him. How could they be delegates if they couldn't even communicate effectively? Driven by this, Rex turned his inventive mind to the problem. His suit had limited bioscanner capabilities, but he managed to jury-rig a crude sensor array using parts scavenged from a damaged maintenance droid in his room and his own multi-tool. He focused it on detecting subtle electromagnetic fluctuations in airborne particulate matter. It was a long shot, but he hoped to at least get a rudimentary understanding of her non-verbal cues. One cycle, as he was calibrating the device, Zylitha entered his room without preamble. She often did this, moving with that unnerving reptilian silence. She watched him, her head tilted. He held up the device. "I'm trying to understand," he said, gesturing between them. "Your signals." She came closer, her emerald eyes studying the contraption. He activated it. The small screen flickered with complex waveforms and particulate density readings. He pointed to a peak in the EM field. "When you seem displeased, this pattern appears." He then adjusted it, remembering the subtle aura when she'd cleared the rockfall. "And this, when you are focused, or using your abilities." Zylitha watched, her expression unreadable to him, but the device showed a complex, rapidly shifting series of patterns. Then, she reached out a clawed finger and gently touched the sensor. The display went wild for a moment, then settled into a steady, rhythmic pulse that was almost calm. A faint, surprisingly pleasant scent, like ozone and rain on dry earth, wafted from her. "Is that good?" Rex asked, hesitantly. She looked at him, then at the device, then back at him. A low, soft chuffing sound, almost like a cat's purr but deeper, vibrated from her chest. The glow at her throat brightened, a warm, inviting hue. His device registered a spike in a specific pheromonal compound he mentally tagged as contentment, or approval. It was a breakthrough, however small. Over the next few ship days, they developed a rudimentary system. Rex would observe her, correlate her visible reactions and the device's readings, and slowly, painstakingly, begin to decipher the nuances of her communication. He learned that a certain rapid flutter in her bioelectric field indicated curiosity, while a sharp, metallic scent accompanied agitation or warning. He discovered that the subtle shifts in her scale coloration were also tied to these states, a visual language he'd previously missed. During one of these sessions, Zylitha surprised him by producing a small, smooth stone from a hidden pouch at her belt. She placed it on the floor and focused her attention on it. Slowly, a faint, intricate pattern of light appeared on its surface, glowing symbols that resonated with the carvings he'd seen in the Basilisk warrens. She looked at him, then at the stone, then back at him, her biofield pulsing with an intensity he now recognized as importance. "Is this your language?" Rex asked, fascinated. "Writing?" She nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. She then tapped the stone, then pointed to herself. "Zylitha." She seemed to convey, her field echoing the sound of her name as he'd heard the Conquered officer speak it. She then tapped Rex. "Rex," he said. Her field attempted to mimic the sound, the pheromonal signature one of intense concentration. She then touched the stone again, and the symbols shifted. She made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the ship, the stars visible through the viewport, then pointed back to the stone. The symbols pulsed, and Rex felt a profound sense of antiquity, of vast knowledge. "The Eldrin," he murmured, a half-forgotten legend surfacing in his mind. An ancient, ascended species, rumored to have seeded life throughout the galaxy, to have possessed unimaginable wisdom before they vanished. "Is this Eldrin?" Zylitha's biofield surged with what he could only interpret as affirmation, mixed with a deep, resonant sorrow. The glow at her throat dimmed for a moment. She tapped the stone again, then made a gesture of something being lost, scattered. Then, she touched her own chest, near where her heart would be, A library. Rex breathed, the pieces clicking into place. The Eldrin Library. The last one. You're protecting it? Or looking for it? Her affirmation was even stronger this time. The Cathar. The Basilisk warrens, her life warden instincts, it was all connected to this lost legacy of a godlike race. The prophecy the Concord had vaguely mentioned. Perhaps it related to Zylitha, her species, and the rediscovery of this Eldrin knowledge. Their arrival at Aegis Thehelru was met with a flurry of diplomatic aides and security personnel. The station was a city in space, gleaming and sterile, a monument to the Concord's waning authority. Rex, with his charismatic charm, managed to navigate the initial bureaucratic hurdles, while Zylitha's imposing presence and the subtle, unsettling shifts in her biofield kept most of the more officious aides at a respectful distance. The first meeting of the peace initiative was a disaster. The Cathar delegation, a trio of hulking warriors led by a scarred, formidable brood leader named Gracthol, radiated open hostility. Their language was a series of harsh clicks and guttural growls that seemed to scrape at the nerves. They made no pretense of diplomacy, their multi-lensed eyes scanning Rex and Zylitha as if assessing cuts of meat. The lesser beings will state their terms for surrender. Gracthol's translator drone blared, its synthesized voice flat and devoid of inflection. Rex, despite the chilling effect of their presence, stepped forward. We are not here to surrender, brood leader. We are here to discuss de-escalation and mutual understanding. He projected confidence, though his palms were sweating. His code demanded he try, even in the face of such blatant aggression. Zylitha stood beside him, silent but radiating a cold, powerful energy. Rex's crude device registered her biofield as a tight, defensive shield, her pheromonal output sharp and warning. Gracthol let out a rattling chuff that might have been laughter. Understanding. The Cathar understand one thing: the strong consume, the weak perish. You offer nothing of value, human, and the scaled one, she is an aberration. A relic of a failed cycle. Her kind were meant to be erased. The brood leader's gaze lingered on Zylitha. A predatory hunger mixed with something else, a flicker of what might have been fear, quickly suppressed. A prophecy speaks of the reptilia's return, of their liberation, disrupting the great hunt. Such foolishness will not be permitted. The Eldrin's tainted echoes will be silenced, and all life will find its purposes to feed the Cathar. Zylitha hissed, a low, dangerous sound. Her claws flexed, and the glow at her throat pulsed with corrosive green light. Rex subtly placed a hand on her arm. Not here, he murmured, hoping his device would translate the intent. Her biofield fluctuated, then subsided slightly, though the metallic scent of her anger still hung in the air. The negotiations continued in this vein for days, achieving nothing but escalating tension. Rex used his inventiveness to try and find common ground, proposing trade routes, shared research into stellar phenomena, anything to steer the conversation away from consumption and conquest. The Cathar dismissed it all with contempt. During a recess, Rex found Zylitha staring out a viewport at the swirling colors of the gas giant below. Her biofield was turbulent, a storm of frustration and a deeper, colder emotion he was beginning to recognize as grief. They want to destroy everything you protect, Rex said softly, standing beside her. She turned to him, her emerald eyes filled with a pain that transcended species. She touched the Eldrin stone at her belt, then made a gesture of planting a seed, of something growing, of life flourishing. Then she made a fist, crushing the imaginary seedling. This was what the Cathar represented to her, the antithesis of life, the undoing of creation. The Eldrin Library, Rex said. It's not just knowledge, is it? It's life. Seeds, essences, the blueprint for renewal. Zylitha nodded, her biofield pulsing with a desperate affirmation. The prophecy about her species' liberation, it was tied to this. Her people weren't just to be freed from oppression, but to become catalysts for a galactic rebirth, using the Eldrin's legacy, and the Cathar were determined to stop it. One evening, after another fruitless and hostile session, Rex returned to his quarters to find a Cathar assassin waiting for him. It was fast, silent, its limbs tipped with poisoned blades. Rex, relying on pure instinct and the brawling skills he'd picked up in less reputable starports, managed to dodge the initial attack. He slammed his scavenged sensor device surprisingly robust into the Cathar's multifaceted eyes, momentarily disorienting it. But the assassin was relentless. It slashed his arm, a searing pain lancing through him. As he stumbled back, Zylitha burst into the room, a silent whirlwind of fury. She moved with breathtaking speed, her claws tearing through the assassin's lighter armor, her tail lashing out like a bludgeon. The assassin, clearly not expecting such a ferocious defense of the human, was overwhelmed. In moments, it lay broken and still. Rex clutched his bleeding arm, the Cathar poison already making his vision swim. Zylitha was at his side instantly. She ripped away the torn fabric of his sleeve, her expression intense. Without hesitation, she bit into her own forearm. Emerald blood, glowing brightly, welled from the wound. She pressed her bleeding arm against his, her blood mingling with his. A wave of intense cold, followed by a burning heat, coursed through Rex's body. He cried out, his muscles spasming. The pain was excruciating, but then, almost as quickly, it began to subside. He looked at his arm. The angry, inflamed wound was closing, the dark veins of poison receding. The healing was astonishingly fast, far more potent than the minor suit repair he'd witnessed. Within minutes, only a faint pink scar remained, already fading. Her blood pulsed with an inner light where it had touched his skin, a temporary luminous tracery. He stared at her, speechless, a profound sense of awe washing over him. She had saved his life, sharing her very essence. The glow from her own wound was already dimming as it healed. Zylitha, he breathed, his voice hoarse. He reached out, his fingers tracing the intricate pattern of her scales where her arm had pressed against his. A jolt, like static electricity but warmer, passed between them. Her biofield enveloped him, no longer sharp or defensive, but soft, pulsing with a complex array of emotions. He was beginning to understand concern, relief, and something else, something deeper, more resonant. The pheromonal bouquet shifted, becoming almost sweet, laced with that unique scent of ozone and rain. He looked into her emerald eyes, and for the first time, he saw not just an alien, a protector, or a mystery, but a person. A profound connection sparked between them, forged in shared danger and cemented by her incredible sacrifice. The failed peace initiative, the Cathar threat. The Eldrin Library, it all seemed to fade into the background for a moment, replaced by the intensity of this shared experience. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that their destinies were now irrevocably intertwined. The hunt for the Eldrin Library was no longer just her quest, it was theirs. And their unexpected union, born of conflict, was slowly, undeniably, transforming into something far more powerful. The assassination attempt was a clear message the Cathar were not interested in peace, and Zylitha was their primary target. The Concord, flustered and embarrassed by the security breach on their flagship station, tried to downplay the incident. But Rex knew they were running out of time. The peace initiative was a farce, a dangerous charade. We need to leave. Rex told Zylitha the next cycle, his voice low and urgent. They were in her quarters, the door sealed. His arm still tingled faintly where her blood had healed him. This station isn't safe. The Cathar know you're important, tied to the prophecy and the Eldrin Library. They won't stop. Zylitha listened, her gaze fixed on him. Her biofield, which Rex's modified scanner now interpreted with growing accuracy, showed agreement, tinged with a grim determination. She touched the Eldrin stone at her belt. The faint symbols glowed, and she projected a series of images into his mind, not through telepathy, but through a subtle manipulation of his optic nerves, via her focused bioelectric field, a skill she was only now revealing. He saw star maps, ancient pathways, a hidden nebula, the library. She knew where it was, or at least, where to begin the search. The Concord won't let us go, Rex said, thinking aloud. Not after dragging us into this mess. We'll have to be inventive. His charismatic smile, usually reserved for sources or charming his way out of trouble, now held a roguish glint. A plan was forming, a renegade pilot's specialty. Their escape from Aegis Thea was a masterclass in improvisation and audacity. Rex, using his knowledge of Concord protocols gleaned from accessible databanks and a healthy dose of social engineering, managed to create a series of diversions, a feigned reactor coolant leak in one sector, a falsified Cathar signal detected near another. Zylitha, with her silence-weaving abilities, created pockets of absolute quiet around them as they moved through restricted corridors, her presence nullifying motion sensors and audio pickups. She even amplified whispers from distant guard patrols, giving them advance warning. They made their way to a secluded docking bay, one Rex had noted earlier, used for diplomatic shuttles that had less stringent security. His target a sleek, fast courier vessel, unarmed but built for speed. As Rex bypassed the cockpit security codes, his fingers flying over the interface, Zylitha stood guard, a silent, formidable sentinel, Her scales had shifted to a darker, more muted tone, blending with the shadows. The glow at her throat was suppressed, a sign of her intense focus. Just as the courier's engines hummed to life, alarms blared across the station. Grakful, the Cathar brood leader, appeared at the docking bay entrance, flanked by two heavily armed warriors. "The reptilia will not escape!" Grakthal roared, his energy lance powering up. Rex slammed the activation sequence, the courier lurching forward. "Hang on." Zylitha didn't need to be told. As the ship shot out of the docking bay, pursued by Cathar energy blasts that seared the station's superstructure, she was already at the auxiliary console, her clawed fingers surprisingly adept at manipulating the unfamiliar controls. She rerouted power to the shields, her biofield flaring as she seemed to intuitively understand the ship's systems. The Cathar scout ships, docked nearby, were quick to give chase. Rex pushed the courier to its limits, weaving through the station's superstructure, using its bulk as cover. "They're faster than this bucket." He yelled over the whine of the engines. "Not for long." Zylitha's voice, a low rasp, surprised him. It was one of the few times she'd spoken in his auditory range. She was pointing to a Cathar pursuer on the tactical display. A section of its engine cowling suddenly glowed cherry red, then exploded. The ship veered off, disabled. Rex stared. "What did you do?" She tapped her temple, then made a gesture towards the Cathar ship. Her biofield had spiked intensely for a moment. Had she somehow overloaded its systems with a focused electromagnetic pulse? Her abilities continued to astound him. Despite her intervention, two Cathar fighters clung to their tail. They were taking hits, shields failing. "We're not going to make it to a jump point like this." Rex gritted his teeth, pulling the ship into a dangerous dive towards the gas giant below. "The library calls for a specific resonance." Zylitha conveyed, her hand on the Eldrin stone, which pulsed with a faint light. She pointed towards a turbulent region in the gas giant's upper atmosphere. "There, a hidden passage." Trusting her, Rex plunged the courier into the swirling, hypervelocity clouds. The ship bucked and screamed, alarms blaring. One of the Cathar fighters, less maneuverable, was torn apart by the atmospheric forces. The other, piloted with grim skill, followed them in. Deeper they dived, into a maelstrom of lightning and exotic gases. Just as Rex thought the ship would be crushed, Zylitha cried out, a single, resonant note. The Eldrin stone blazed with light, and for an instant, a tunnel of calm, stable space opened before them, a pathway through the storm. Rex steered into it without hesitation. Their remaining Cathar pursuer, caught off guard, tried to follow but was buffeted by the collapsing walls of the temporary passage and vanished from their sensors, likely destroyed. They emerged into the relative calm of a vast, crystalline cave system hidden deep within the gas giant's core, the passage ceiling behind them. The courier, battered and smoking, crash-landed heavily onto a smooth, obsidian plane. Silence descended, broken only by the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the groan of stressed metal. Rex unstrapped himself, his body aching. "Well," he coughed, "that was one way to lose a tail." He looked at Zylitha. She was slumped in her seat, the glow at her throat dim, her scales paler than usual. Guiding them through the storm, opening the passage, had clearly taken a tremendous toll. He rushed to her side. "Zylitha, are you all right?" She looked up, her eyes clouded with exhaustion, but she managed a weak nod. A thin trickle of glowing emerald blood oozed from a cut on her temple, sustained during the crash. He gently wiped it away with his thumb. The contact sent that familiar, warm jolt through him. "You saved us," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude and a burgeoning affection that went far beyond simple camaraderie. "You and your magic rock." A faint, breathy chuff escaped her. Her biofield, though weak, pulsed with warmth. He helped her out of the cockpit. They were stranded, their ship a wreck, in an unknown, albeit beautiful, alien environment. But they were alive and they were together. The crystalline caves were breathtaking, glowing with an internal luminescence that cast shifting rainbows across the obsidian floor. Strange, silent flora grew in intricate patterns, pulsing with soft light. It felt like a sanctuary, a place of profound peace, a stark contrast to the violence they had just escaped. Zylitha, leaning heavily on Rex for support, led him towards a shimmering waterfall of what looked like liquid light. "Eldrin healing," she rasped, gesturing towards it. Carefully, Rex helped her into the shallow pool at the base of the falls. As the luminous water cascaded over her, her scales seemed to drink in the light. The glow at her throat brightened, her wounds visibly mending, her exhaustion slowly ebbing away. He watched, mesmerized. The place was attuned to her, or she to it. When she emerged, much of her strength restored, she looked at him, her emerald eyes clearer, deeper. She reached out, taking his hand, her scaled fingers surprisingly gentle. She led him to a secluded alcove, where a bed of soft, glowing moss grew. They sat together in comfortable silence for a long moment, the only sound the distant murmur of the light fall. The Cathar, the Concord, the dangers they faced, seemed a universe away. Here, in this hidden sanctuary, there was only the two of them. Zylitha turned to him, her gaze intense. She began to emit a complex series of pheromonal signals, her biofield creating intricate, dancing patterns of light around her that Rex's enhanced senses, now more attuned to her, could perceive as faint auroras. It was a story, a history, a lament. She showed him images of her people, the reptilia, a species deeply connected to the currents of life, guardians of ancient Eldrin wisdom. She showed him their persecution, their near extinction at the hands of species like the Cathar who feared their connection to life, their potential to shift the galactic balance. The prophecy of their liberation wasn't just about freedom, it was about the restoration of this balance, a healing of the galaxy itself. She was one of the last, carrying the hope of her entire race, a life warden not just of Xylos, but of a legacy that could save them all. Rex listened, not just with his ears or his device, but with his heart. He saw her strength, her vulnerability, the immense burden she carried. His journalistic detachment had long since evaporated, replaced by a fierce protectiveness and a deep, resonant empathy. His own code, his drive for justice, resonated strongly with her mission. "You're not alone in this anymore, Zylitha," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, gently tracing the line of her jaw, his fingers brushing against the smooth, cool scales. "I'm with you." Her emerald eyes softened. A specific pheromone, one he now unequivocally recognized as deep affection and trust, enveloped him. It was intoxicating, more potent than any perfume, speaking directly to his core. Her bioelectric field pulsed in harmony with his own heartbeat, a subtle thrum that resonated through his entire being. She leaned closer, her reptilian features somehow beautiful in the soft light. The air crackled with an unspoken intimacy. He saw the faint, inviting glow at her throat, the pulse of life beneath her scales. He felt the subtle shift of her pheromonal bouquet, a silent invitation. His renegade heart, so long guarded, opened. He leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were cool, smooth, surprisingly soft. It was a kiss that transcended species, a joining of two souls who had found each other across the vastness of space, in the crucible of conflict. Her response was tentative at first, then surer, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had irrevocably formed between them. Her unique biology became part of this intimacy, the faint, warm glow of her skin under his touch, the subtle electric tingle where their bodies met, the unique scent of her that was now inextricably linked with safety, trust, and a love he hadn't known he was capable of. When they finally drew apart, the silence in the alcove was filled with a new understanding, a profound connection that needed no words. They had faced death together, and now, in this hidden sanctuary, they had found a different kind of life, a shared future they would fight for, side by side. The stakes surrounding the Eldrin Library, and the Cathar's relentless pursuit, were higher than ever, but now they faced them not as unwilling allies, but as partners bound by love and a shared destiny. The Cathar's goal was to prevent Zylitha from fulfilling the prophecy of her species' liberation. Now, Rex made that liberation his own driving purpose. Their sanctuary, however idyllic, could not shield them forever. The Eldrin stone, now clutched in Zylitha's hand, began to pulse with an urgent rhythm, its internal light flickering. She looked at Rex, her expression grim. "They are searching," she conveyed, her biofield sharp with warning. "The Cathar. They sense the library's proximity. Or perhaps, they tracked our entry into this system before their ship was lost." Rex nodded, the brief peace shattering. "They won't give up, Grakthal." He spoke of the Eldrin's tainted echoes. He fears what the library represents. Zylitha projected an image of a vast, shadowy structure, a Genesis chamber, as Rex's mind interpreted it. Within, Cathar figures moved among glowing vats, overseeing the creation of monstrous, twisted lifeforms. They seek to pervert the Eldrin's legacy. Zylitha's intent flowed laced with revulsion. To create an army, using stolen knowledge. Or perhaps, they are trying to engineer something to specifically counteract what I am, what my people represent. The Eldrin Library, Rex realized, wasn't just a repository of information or dormant life seeds. It was a key, a catalyst. And the Cathar were not just trying to destroy it, they were trying to corrupt its power for their own genocidal ends. The prophecy of Zylitha's species liberation likely involved activating or protecting this pure Eldrin core. We need to get to the library before they do. Rex stated, his voice firm. And then, we need to deal with that Genesis chamber. His code of ethics was screaming now. Such an abomination could not be allowed to exist. Their crashed career was beyond repair, but Zylitha, guided by the Eldrin stone and her innate connection to this place, led Rex through the crystalline cave system towards an ancient Eldrin transit hub, hidden deeper within the gas giant's core. It was a marvel of forgotten technology, a nexus of silent, dormant transit tubes. These can take us close, Zylitha explained, her hand resting on a control panel that glowed to life at her touch. The stone in her other hand pulsed, interfacing with the ancient systems. A map of shimmering light appeared, showing a destination, a rogue planet, shrouded in a dark nebula, the location of the true Eldrin Library. What about weapons? Supplies? Rex asked, ever the pragmatist. Their ordeal had left them with little more than the clothes on their backs and his multi-tool. Zylitha gestured to a series of alcoves that shimmered into view. Inside were Eldrin artifacts, personal energy shields, tools that could be adapted into weapons, and nutrient packs that tasted like concentrated sunlight. The ascended species had, it seemed, anticipated future need. As they prepared, Rex felt a new sense of purpose. His life as a lone, renegade journalist felt like a distant dream. Now, he was part of something far larger, fighting not just for a story, or even for survival, but for the future of galactic life, alongside the woman he loved. Zylitha, too, seemed transformed. The burden she carried was still immense, but it was now shared. A new light shone in her eyes, a fierce hope that tempered her ancient sorrow. The transit was instantaneous, a disorienting lurch through non-space. They emerged onto the surface of the rogue planet, a world steeped in perpetual twilight, its sky dominated by the swirling, ominous colors of the dark nebula. The air was cold, thin, but breathable. Before them stood a colossal, obsidian ziggurat, pulsating with a faint inner light, the Eldrin Library. But they were not alone. Cathar drop ships were already landing near the ziggurat's base, disgorging squads of warriors. Grakthal himself was there, directing the assault, his harsh voice echoing across the desolate landscape. They found it. Rex breathed, his hand instinctively going to the energy weapon they'd procured. They must have a relic too. Some way of tracking Eldrin energy signatures. The Genesis chamber, it must be nearby, Zylitha said, her voice tight. They would not bring such force just for the library. They intend to use its core to power their abominations. She pointed towards a vast, dark fissure in the planet's crust, miles away, from which a faint, sickly green glow emanated. Their path was clear. They had to reach the library's core, secure or activate whatever was necessary to fulfill the prophecy, and then destroy the Cathar's Genesis chamber before it could unleash its horrors upon the galaxy. The fate of countless worlds and the liberation of Zylitha's species hung in the balance. This was the precipice, the final act of their desperate journey. The approach to the Eldrin Library was a running battle. Rex, using his renegade cunning and the surprisingly potent Eldrin energy weapon, created choke points, laid traps, and used his charisma to sow momentary confusion among Cathar patrols by mimicking their comm signals with his multi-tool. Zylitha was a force of nature. She moved with lethal grace, her silence-weaving abilities allowing them to bypass Cathar sentries, her claws and tail devastating in close combat. When her skin was pierced, her glowing, corrosive blood became a potent weapon, eating through Cathar armor and flesh. They fought as a seamless unit, anticipating each other's moves, their individual strengths amplified by their bond. Inside the ziggurat, the library was not a place of books or data crystals, but a living ecosystem of light and sound, a vast, interconnected consciousness. Glowing motes of information drifted through the air like fireflies. Ancient melodies resonated from crystalline structures, and images of countless species, long extinct or yet to be born, flickered on ethereal screens. It was the sum total of Eldrin understanding of life itself. The core of life, Zylitha whispered, her voice filled with reverence. Her biofield resonated with the library, her scales shimmering with absorbed light. The Eldrin stone in her hand pulsed in time with the ziggurat's heart. This is what they want to corrupt. Grakthal's forces were already deep within, attempting to interface their crude technology with the delicate Eldrin systems. Explosions rocked the structure as Cathar demolition teams tried to breach inner sanctums. Wanting to reach the central chamber, Zylitha urged, pointing towards the ziggurat's apex. The control nexus. From there, I can awaken it. And shield it from them. The ascent was fraught with peril. They navigated corridors filled with deadly Cathar hunters, bypassed energy fields, and solved ancient, Eldrin environmental puzzles that barred their way. Rex's inventiveness and Zylitha's intuitive connection to the Eldrin tech proving a formidable combination. During one fierce skirmish, Rex was pinned down by heavy fire. Zylitha, seeing him in mortal danger, unleashed a wave of focused sonic energy, a silent scream that shattered the Cathar weapons and disoriented the attackers, giving Rex the opening he needed. Her power was growing, amplified by the library's energies and her own fierce determination. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast, spherical room where the very fabric of reality seemed to shimmer. In the center floated a multifaceted crystal, the size of a small moon, pulsing with all the colors of creation, the core of life. Cathar technicians were swarming around it, attempting to attach massive, dark conduits leading back towards the fissure in the Genesis chamber. Grakthal stood before the core, his stance triumphant. The Eldrin's power will fuel the Cathar's ascendance. Your pathetic species, Reptilia, will be but a footnote, your prophecy a forgotten lie. Not if I can help it, ugly, Rex yelled, opening fire. The final battle commenced. Rex laid down a barrage of covering fire, drawing the attention of Grakthal's personal guard. Zylitha, meanwhile, raced towards the core. She placed the Eldrin stone upon its surface. Light blazed, a wave of pure life energy expanding outwards, pushing back the Cathar and shorting out their crude equipment. Grakthal roared in fury and charged Zylitha, his personal energy shields flaring. You will not deny us our destiny. Rex intercepted him, his own Eldrin shield crackling, as it absorbed the Cathar leader's brutal blows. He was outmatched in sheer strength, but his agility and inventive use of the chamber's shifting geometry kept him in the fight. He was buying Zylitha time. Zylitha, bathed in the light of the core, was undergoing a transformation. Her scales shone with an inner luminescence, patterns of ancient Eldrin script glowing on her skin. Her bioelectric field expanded, a vast network of healing, protective energy. She was interfacing directly with the library, becoming a conduit for its immense power. The prophecy was unfolding. Her species was not just to be liberated. They were to be its living guardians, its voice. She raised her hands and a wave of pure, resonant sound washed through the chamber, not a destructive force, but a song of creation, of life, of healing. It resonated deep within the Cathar, not with pain, but with something they had long forgotten, or perhaps never known: empathy, connection, the antithesis of their predatory nature. Some Cathar warriors faltered, their weapons lowering, their multi-lensed eyes wide with confusion and a dawning, terrifying awareness. Grakthal, however, was immune, his hatred too deeply ingrained. He swatted Rex aside, sending him crashing into a console. No! The hunger is eternal! The hunt is supreme! He lunged for Zylitha, his claws extended. But Zylitha was ready. She met his charge not with violence, but with an overwhelming wave of the core's energy, channeled through her own being. It wasn't an attack, but an offering, an invitation to change, to heal. Grakthal screamed as the energy enveloped him, his chitinous armor cracking, not from force, but from an internal pressure, as if his very essence was rejecting the light. He thrashed, then, with a final, agonized roar, he began to dissolve, not into ash, but into motes of confused, dissipating energy, his connection to the Cathar hive mind severed. With Grakthal's demise, the remaining Cathar in the library, already disoriented by Zylitha's song, broke and fled, or simply collapsed, their predatory drive extinguished, leaving them lost and bewildered. Zylitha turned to the conduits leading to the Genesis chamber. With a gesture, she sent a pulse of focused Eldrin energy down them, not to destroy, but to rewrite. The sickly green glow from the distant fissure flickered, then changed, becoming a soft, cerulean blue. Rex, bruised but alive, pulled himself up. What did you do? The Genesis chamber, it was built on stolen Eldrin life-shaping technology. Zylitha explained, her voice richer, more resonant than before, imbued with the library's wisdom. I repurposed it. It will no longer create monsters. It will nurture life, guided by the library's pure matrix. A chance for new beginnings. The immediate crisis in the library was over. The Cathar's plan was shattered. Zylitha had not just protected the Eldrin legacy, she had activated it, becoming its living heart. The prophecy of her species' liberation was no longer a distant hope. It was a dawning reality, not just for the reptilia, but potentially for the Cathar themselves, offered a path away from their destructive hunger. They stood together in the light of the core, Zylitha's hand finding Rex's. The library hummed around them, a symphony of life renewed, but their work was not yet entirely done. The repurposed Genesis chamber, now a beacon of potential healing, needed to be understood and protected. And the wider galaxy needed to know what had transpired. The aftermath of the confrontation at the Eldrin Library sent ripples across the galaxy. The Concord, initially bewildered by the cessation of Cathar aggression in that sector and the strange energy readings from the rogue planet, cautiously investigated. What they found astounded them. The Cathar forces in disarray, many catatonic or displaying uncharacteristically passive behavior. The Genesis chamber, once a symbol of terror, now pulsing with benign, life-giving energy, and Rex Valerian and Zylitha alive, standing as guardians of an awakened Eldrin marvel. Rex, with his journalistic flair and newfound gravitas, relayed their story, a carefully crafted narrative that highlighted the Cathar's thwarted perversion of ancient technology and Zylitha's role in restoring balance. He omitted the more personal, intimate details of their journey, but the truth of their bond, their partnership, was evident to all who saw them together. Zylitha, no longer just a Xylosian biotic entity, but a figure of immense power and wisdom, spoke through Rex, or her bioelectric and pheromonal communications translated by a device quickly designed by inspired Concord xenolinguists, based on Rex's initial crude invention. Her message was one of hope, of interconnectedness, and of the potential for even the most feared species to find a new path. The liberation of Zylitha's species began not with a grand uprising, but with a quiet awakening. Other reptilia, hidden in remote corners of the galaxy, felt the resonance of the activated Eldrin Library, a call to their shared heritage. Slowly, they began to emerge, drawn by the promise of renewal. Zylitha, as the first to fully integrate with the library's consciousness, became their de facto leader, their guiding light. The Cathar hegemony fractured. Some factions, enraged by Grakthal's failure and the infection of their warriors with passivity, vowed revenge. Others, however, particularly those exposed to the library's song or the repurposed Genesis chamber's energies, began to question their endless hunger. A slow, arduous process of potential societal change began within their ranks, a development few would have ever predicted. Rex and Zylitha, their love forged in fire and sacrifice, found their purpose redefined. The Concord, desperate for solutions in a rapidly changing galactic landscape, saw in them a unique opportunity. They were offered a new role: roving ambassadors, troubleshooters, tasked with fostering understanding and resolving conflicts in remote or troubled sectors, particularly those involving newly contacted species or the fallout from the Cathar schism. Several years later, the Star Seeker Tsudu, a vessel gifted to them by a grateful Concord, far more advanced than Rex's original ship, slipped through the star-dusted void. On the bridge, Rex Valerian stood beside Zylitha. Her scales, now perpetually shimmering with a soft, internal light, reflected the myriad colors of a passing nebula. The faint, pleasant scent of ozone and rain, her unique pheromonal signature of contentment, was a constant, comforting presence for him. He no longer needed a device to understand her. Their bond had deepened to a point where her emotions, her intentions, were as clear to him as spoken words. Zylitha leaned her head against his shoulder, her emerald eyes gazing at the starscape. The Tyran cluster reports progress. She murmured, her voice a soft, melodious hum that resonated pleasantly in his chest. The two warring factions have agreed to mediation, thanks to the Eldrin agricultural data we shared. Rex smiled, putting his arm around her. And the Cathar dissidents on Xylos are actually helping tend the rehabilitated Basilisk warrens. Who would have thought? The irony wasn't lost on him. The place where their journey began was now a symbol of improbable peace. Life finds a way, Zylitha said, a profound truth echoing in her voice. When it is nurtured, not dominated. She looked up at him, her love for him shining in her eyes, a beacon as constant as the stars. Our unexpected union, across the stars, it has brought more new life than we could have imagined. Rex Valerian, the renegade pilot who sought a story, had found something far greater: a partner, a purpose, and a love that spanned galaxies. Zylitha, the last guardian, had become the first herald of a new age, her species liberated not just to survive but to heal. Together, they were a testament to the enduring power of connection, the courage to fight for love and new life, even in the darkest reaches of the universe. As their ship journeyed onwards, towards the next crisis, the next hope, their linked hands and shared gaze spoke of a future filled with infinite possibilities. A quiet promise whispered across the silent expanse of space. Their fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt a little less dark, a little more hopeful, under their watchful care.